Hello, I'm Hilton Super, the Vice Chairman of Student Group, and I'm looking forward to interviewing today Jason Keck, the founder and CEO of Broker Buddha. Now, this is where we interview people who are changing the world, people who are inspiring us with their achievements and creativity, their acumen, particularly with the use of technology. Now, in previous interviews, Dennis Guada and I have interviewed over 250 amazing people and achieved more than 14 million views on YouTube. Now, this interview series on Citiesabc is in partnership with our platforms openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, all fourth industrial revolution-based platforms using Web3 technologies that employ the use of truth and trust through blockchain and the deployment of data analytics, AI, and machine learning. Now, today, I'd like to introduce you to Jason, who is the founder and CEO of Broker Buddha. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Hilton. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good. Now, Jason, you're a seasoned technology entrepreneur and business development expert. You founded Broker Buddha a few years ago, which is really involved in the InsurTech space that is really transforming the insurance brokerage industry through its basically white label vertical SaaS offering. Now, a little bit of a background. You previously used to work at Shazam and Tumblr before starting Broker Buddha, and you really are sort of honing your skills because you sort of developed those when you were Accenture and Nextel.
Right.
Now, Broker Buddha is a cutting-edge platform that helps insurance brokers streamline workflows. Now, the idea obviously came up when you were probably at Shazam, et cetera, and Tumblr. But tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you are. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in New York City. So we've got a great office here, Flatiron Union Square, and right in the center of where a lot of technology companies are here. So
brilliant. And in terms of where you grew up and you went to school and university to hone your entrepreneurial spirit, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so actually, I was born in Dubai, raised in New Orleans, went to private school there, and raised in what I would consider somewhat of a middle class family, and surrounded by kind of a very affluent group of people. Watched my dad buy and build a company on his own, which was really inspiring for me, and kind of really, as I sort of discovered the world and looked out around the world, always wanted to get out of New Orleans, get into business and really, I don't know if I'd say climb the corporate ladder necessarily, but sort of, expand out of, the middle class life that I had into something that I felt was, bigger and better. And so I was very fortunate to get into Harvard University out of high school and spent 4 years studying computer science in Boston, or Cambridge, if you will, and started to develop some of my technical knowledge and combine that with some of my personal skills to, when I graduated from Harvard, I moved out to California as part of the .com rush, if you will, and I've had a fantastic 25-year career in technology since then.
Mm-hmm. So when you first went out to the West Coast to Silicon Valley, was your first gig Shazam, or what were you doing?
No, I joined a really hot startup called Scient. It was a company that was kind of like a very early digital agency that was helping other entrepreneurs build websites, really e-commerce platforms and online transactional tools. Met some fantastic people, but as many companies in the .com era did, when the funding dried up, their business dried up, and that's how that's where I moved on to Nextel. Spent 4 years there, and then moved abroad to London with Accenture for a couple of years. So basically, spent my 20s working in what I would consider kind of more corporate environments, kind of learning how businesses operate, understanding how the world works, so to speak. And then it was in my early 30s when I joined Shazam in London, started to get more familiar with early stage businesses, and definitely switching over into more consumer tech versus more B2B tech, and spent most of my 30s at companies like Shazam and Tumblr and a couple of other mobile app based startups that I did. And about 6 years ago, helped co-found Broker Buddha here in an incubator in New York.
Fantastic. So when in your early days at Shazam, at what stage was Shazam in its development?
Shazam had an interesting journey. So it was founded around 2001 and I joined in 2008. So Shazam, the technology was invented, much earlier than the iPhone launched. But they weren't able to commercialize it for quite some time. I joined, it was around the time that feature phones started getting functional enough to be able to run apps. So this is like 2006, 2007, Shazam started becoming a thing. I joined in 2008, about a year before we launched on the iPhone. And I was part of the team that helped turn that company into a, multi-million-dollar, one of the largest digital global brands of the 2000s. So really fun journey, growing that business and kind of being one of the leading mobile apps that everybody still uses today.
Absolutely. And in terms of moving from there to Tumblr, what was that journey like?
Shazam was my first experience with an early stage startup, and I absolutely loved it. I got to do something in music, which was entertaining. I got to take everything I learned in my 20s and bring it to a company that was growing and developing and still defining itself. And a lot of my experiences were really appreciated and valued there, and I think had a big impact on the business. The company got to a point where it was pretty mature from a product and business perspective, and I had a whole bunch of ideas for things that I wanted to do. I was young. I was, I'd been sort of successful in most of my early endeavors, and so I actually left Shazam to start my own business in the mobile app space. And spent about 4 years doing my first 2 startups actually before Tumblr. And so I built one app called Stereotypes, which was a music social network. We took a couple of different approaches to building that business that never got off the ground. And then I built a music fitness app called Motion Tracks with another co-founder. That product's still in the market and doing great. Sort of like a Peloton without the bike. So streaming fitness content. And then ultimately landed at Tumblr, tried to help turn it around as it was obviously a very well-known brand and very popular, but needed some support in kind of getting it to compete again with the Instagrams and the Twitters of the world. So spent a couple years at Tumblr, and then kind of news got out that Tumblr, which was owned by Yahoo, was going to be acquired by Verizon. And, in these large corporate environments, there's just not a lot of innovation happening when you're in the middle of a massive corporate takeover. And so that's what got me thinking, hey, I really enjoyed the early stage businesses. And at the time I didn't have my next thing. I wasn't kind of ready. And so I started contacting the incubators around New York who were kind of developing and proving ideas and in theory looking for founders to take them over. And that's how I came across the team at Interplay who incubated Broker Buddha initially. And they asked me to come in and be the co-founder and run the company.
Mm-hmm. So based on your experience, something you said earlier on in terms of when, companies get very big and they get into the sort of this corporate growth strategy, through acquisition or whatever, or various series of investment.
Yep.
Tends to slow things down and not stifle, I don't know, it's not negative, not stifle, but slow down the development of innovation. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's both unfortunate and necessary, right? So as a large company with an established business model that's working, you don't really want a lot of change, right? You want incremental growth, not sort of transformational growth. It's too risky at that stage. Yes. When you combine that with the fact that the company is going through an acquisition, people don't know what's going to happen to their roles after the acquisition. It sort of deflates people's energy to take on new initiatives or do anything that might kind of risk their position. It's unfortunate, right? I would think in that situation, you would want to put your best foot forward and show people that you're being innovative and looking to grow. But that's generally not what happens when you're going through an M&A process. And with Yahoo, it was they had actually publicly announced that they were running the process. So there was a whole 6 months where it was like nobody knew who the buyer was going to be. And then there was the acquisition. And then it was like, okay, you knew there was going to be at least another 1 to 2 years of integration before there was really a kind of a stable base to build from. And I don't know. I wasn't in the mood to kind of hang around for that and guess what was going to happen on the other end and lobby for something for me. And so, I started looking around and found Broker Buddha.
So you were based in London at that time, and the incubator.
I was back in New York at that point. Actually, I'd moved from when I left Shazam. I'd moved back to the States. So
yeah, and the incubator that or accelerator that you finally approached, that had a team that was effectively building Broker Buddha. Where did you meet them?
So when I left Shazam, I had moved to San Francisco briefly with my wife, and then I don't know. She and I decided San Francisco wasn't the best place for us. We looked at LA and New York. We ended up moving to New York and really loved it here. So when I was running my first 2 startups in New York, I had been getting connected into the startup community in New York City, everything from incubators to investors to general entrepreneur networks. And I had met the founders of this incubator called Interplay, who they had both a foundry business where they would create companies and support them in growth. And they also had a venture arm that would invest in other companies. So I had met with them to both pitch them on my startup at the time, and then kind of met with them again later when we were shutting down my first startup to see if they had kind of roles for me and my team. So I'd kind of been getting to know them during my time in New York. And so, when things at Tumblr felt stagnant, I decided to reach out to them again and just say, hey, what's going on? Anything new? Anything that you might need help with? And sure enough, they had the right thing at the right time, and I joined the team pretty quickly.
So InsurTech, that's a growing industry.
It is.
You met the team. You basically said, okay, this is how we're going to move it forward. Did they have some innovative tech at that time, or did you have to develop it yourself?
Yeah. So what I really liked about the opportunity was that within the incubator, they had been growing a digital insurance agency called Founder Shield. And Founder Shield had looked around the industry for software to help them put insurance applications online. It was a kind of a logical thing to do from their perspective, and yet when they sniffed around the market, they found zero tools off the shelf, and so they decided to build their own tools for online insurance applications. And after a couple of years of doing that efficiently and profitably, they managed to build a scalable, profitable insurance agency, and sort of looked around the industry and said, this tool still hasn't been developed for everybody else. And the incubator sort of realized that and said, why don't we create a business that provides the same software to the 35,000 agencies around the country? Because man, if you guys are using it to be successful, certainly everybody else could as well. Mm-hmm. And so that was the genesis behind the idea for Broker Buddha. And what I liked about it was obviously that they'd sort of proven that it worked for this one digital agency. And so we partnered with that agency. They essentially invested in Broker Buddha, gave us all of their IP, and we now took that technology and have turned it into the business we have today.
Oh, fantastic. So in terms of the people listening, the process of signing, of getting a customer onto an insurance contract requires quite a bit of information in the front end.
Yep.
Then once you've got the client is now on board, there's the ongoing relationship. And then of course there's the claims process that is the end of that, and the payments, etc.
Yep.
How seamless is this whole process with the platform that you've built?
Yeah, so we focus primarily on what's called the submission process. Submissions are when when a policy needs to be procured, the insurance broker is responsible for collecting customer information, compiling that into what they call a carrier submission. So it's something that they deliver to the carrier, either in the form of a signed document, or an application, or a spreadsheet of information, or kind of there's various components of the submission depending on the type of policy and the carrier. And so the broker is responsible for doing that, both when they're onboarding a new client, and then as it relates to business insurance, which is the area we focus on, commercial insurance, they have to do that every year. And the process of doing that every year is just a huge pain because, for the most part, they're asking the same questions over and over again every year. And there's some things that change, and that's why they have to do it every year, because in order to renew the policy, there's a need to get updated information and get updated quotes associated with that information. And so that's where we focus. It's different in personal lines, homeowners, auto. The value of your car doesn't change year to year, so you don't have to do this. You don't have to renew your policies. People just they sort of auto renew. But in commercial and business insurance, the submission workflow itself is just an administrative nightmare. So we focus on what we call pre-bind data and signature capture for both new business and renewal commercial policies. And that's it. So claims we don't touch today. Down the road, that may be something we get into. And there's another category of workflow called service. So if you want what's called endorsements to your policy, you want to add a new vehicle, or you want to increase your limits, there's some other workflows around that we don't focus on today. One thing I learned from Shazam is that if you want to be successful, you have to focus on one thing. All right. Shazam was like, just press the button, tell me the name of the song. It's simple, it's easy. It does a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's what people remember you for. And so for us, we're a client-facing digital engagement platform for submissions, and that's it.
Yeah.
So.
And what's the business model from your perspective as the broker Buddha?
Yeah, it's a traditional vertical SaaS business. So we charge annual license fees based on the number of seats. It's a seat license model, so number of users that have logins. We charge an annual fee for that. We typically sell to the agency, not to the user. So we don't, it's not like we contact individuals and ask them to sign up. It's what you might call an enterprise SaaS platform versus a kind of a traditional kind of SMB SaaS platform.
And the data that is collected on the platform, is that data sitting on your servers and you have to pay for it, or does your client have to share some of that cost?
No, I mean, we are a traditional public cloud hosted infrastructure. So we host our database and our application on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and we pay all the hosting fees associated with that. Our clients, who are the brokers, not the insureds, pay us an annual fee to operate the platform on their behalf, essentially.
So tell me a little bit about the challenges that obviously you've solved some of the biggest problems, which is the front end, know your client, get the information, and then do the incremental updates, which just saves a massive amount of time in the process, I can understand. Yeah. But what are the other challenges that you have in developing this type of model?
When I first helped co-found the company, I had this, I had this insecurity around my experience with insurance. And I thought, coming from social media and music, am I really going to be the right guy for this? And I found that one of the biggest strengths I brought to the table was this focus on design and user experience. So when I said, look, if I were going to build an online platform, I want to make sure that it looks and feels, inspiring and trustworthy, and doesn't look like a, green screen insurance terminal, right? And that was actually, that actually turned out to be true. And the design of our product has been incredibly well received and appreciated, because if brokers want to put something online in front of their clients that they've never done before, they want to feel good about it. It's like an identity thing. So it's really important. What I maybe took for granted was the industry's not appetite for change so much, but capacity to change, right? So I did not appreciate how challenging it was to get people to get familiar and comfortable with new technology, right? I've been in tech for the last 10 years. And if you put something new in front of me that is like promises to be good, I'm going to spend, a couple of days trying to figure out how it works and how I can use it to make my job better. The insurance agents who are, have very specific workflows in order to process applications and not make any mistakes are anxious about change. Right? They know how to do things one way. They know it works. So as soon as you introduce something new, even though it's, for us, it was like, look, instead of emailing your clients PDFs and Excel files, just email them a link. It's not a big, in my head, that was not a big change.
Yes.
But I don't think I appreciated the psychological leap that they would have to go through to say, okay, what is my client going to experience? What kind of questions are they going to ask? How do I know? How do I track where things are? And so what I think, maybe to answer your question more directly, the change management aspect of the business was something that I vastly underestimated. And so now we actually, we're familiar with the change management. I've become, I wouldn't say an expert, but I've become very educated on change management as a discipline. And we are now actively incorporating some change management best practices into our implementation process. So in fact, I'm hosting a podcast now called Champions of Change, which focuses on our clients, our agencies, and how they do change management, because the ones who are successful with the change management are the ones successful adopting technology. And we know that the ones successful adopting technology are growing faster than the ones who are not.
Mm-hmm. And so where the majority of your clients, obviously you're based in New York, are you finding it's a localized, or is it now spread across all the states?
No, it's national in scope. We don't have any real concentration. We have clients in New York and California and in, Iowa and Utah. So all over the country.
Right. So there's no sort of a reg tech compliance element to this.
No, we are, we have as a software as a service, we comply with the SOC 2 standards, and we're SOC 2 compliant, and we maintain all the necessary policies and procedures to be that way. But from a regulations perspective, we don't, we're not required to be licensed as a broker. We have to be aware of their requirements as a broker, but for the most part, we're just a software company.
So does your platform as a SaaS platform, can it be used by somebody in London or somebody in Prague?
We don't support international currencies right now. In theory, it could be. Our core technology takes PDFs and turns them into online web forms, so that when you're filling out an application, instead of trying to annotate a PDF, you're typing in fields in a browser. And the reason that's important is that it allows us to do things like make questions required or implement conditional logic. So if you answer this question, I need you to answer this question. And it allows you to do force formatting. So, if something's supposed to be a number, you can't type in a character. And all of that makes a big difference when you're just trying to get a completed application, because that's frankly what all these brokers are trying to do. That starts to fall down a little bit when you go abroad because of things like currency and dates, and we haven't invested in the functionality to support that yet, but it wouldn't be a major leap. So
I mean, you can break it down into regions. You can go Europe.
Yeah, I mean, we could go Europe, although with the UK still in pounds and Europe
the UK
in
pounds,
euros. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's so yeah, for international currency conversion actually is a non-trivial. Well, it's important for the people who work there, especially if they're doing anything cross-border. And it's kind of binary. Either you have it or you don't. It's not a huge lift to do it, but we don't have the resources to go to market in Europe anyway. So we haven't. There's a chance somebody will pull us in and say, "Hey, look, there's nothing over here. Can you please do the work? We'll pay you for it." And we've started to have some of those conversations, but we just haven't taken that step yet.
Yeah. Now, there's been a sort of a major development with use of technology in terms of digital identities. And one of the things that has developed, you talk about self-sovereign identity and things like that. Is there anything in your roadmap that will enable you to incorporate these type of elements into the process? Because it seems a natural for renewals, et cetera, that you don't have to, if you own this identity or corporate identity, it's much easier for the application process because all the changes of the company or the individual along the way are effectively embedded in that SSI. So that's a sovereign identity. So have you started building or thinking a roadmap with incorporating things like that?
Yeah, I mean, after building our initial kind of workflow tools, right, the ability to capture structured data online, the next thing that people have really been asking us for is integrations. Like, hey, we have this information, it lives somewhere else, right? I don't want to have to key it into your system. Is there a way you can do an integration to get it, right? So the first and I don't want to say simplest, but pretty much most straightforward one is doing single sign-on, right? So you've got access to identity information, right? And then after that, what we see is that in the US, most agencies store their customer information in something called an agency management or a broker management system. And so a lot of our engineering efforts right now are focused on getting data in and out of those management systems. And so that's where we're spending our time. We're not seeing as much the single sovereign demand right now. It's more the integration with these systems where the brokers store their customer data. And that's because when you think about what drives the cost of a policy, it comes down to something called exposures, and exposures are different depending on whether you're applying for cyber insurance or GL or property. And so, we haven't seen any other storage systems for this information outside of the broker's management system. But should these other systems begin to host that information, and should the businesses decide to put their information there, then we would absolutely look at integrating with them. So.
I mean, do you integrate other elements in terms of allowing the broker to go and do more investigation using the technologies that we have today, which effectively there's so much public information out there? How much of that is introduced, if at all, into into the process?
Today, not that much. I would say in the US brokerage industry, you've got, for the most part, 4 large national brokers: Aon, Willis, Marsh, and AJ Gallagher, and they cover most of the public companies. And when you look at what we call large commercial policies, they're almost all bespoke, right? So, and yes, there is public data on those, but there's not a lot of structure to what you would consider in a submission. It's mostly a broker goes out and does a bunch of research and kind of develops a pitch to the carrier to say, hey, look, my client is really, very risk averse, and you should give them really good rates. And then once you get down below those 4, they do some public company business, but a lot of it's private company business. And so there isn't as much private company public data that's accessible to be able to support the construction of these submissions. And really the information that's required lives with the insured, lives with the business. So either they have a accounting system that they need to get data out of, or they've got an asset management system that they need to extract and put data in, or extract data from and give to the broker. And so we have looked at doing integrations into client systems. So things like HR management systems. Hey, we need to get payroll information and location information and officer information for workers' comp policies, or we want to integrate into fleet management systems to get vehicle and driver information. So a lot of that stuff we're very interested in and doing research on the brokers right now are really pushing us to integrate with their systems first. And since they're paying us, it tends to be where we focus. But we know that at the end of the day, they need to get updates from the client systems. And so we'll definitely look into those as well.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of like in the States, when you start a company, you register it in your local state. It's a public register. Does your platform access those public registers for the company to confirm that actually is the corporate and that director is that director?
We don't. The brokers tend to rely on the customer for providing that information. So even if they were
no verification process.
There's not. I mean, the verification is that the insured, submits and signs the documents. That's the ultimate verification. So even if we were to be able to go and get that information on behalf of the broker and on behalf of the insured, the broker would still want the insured to be the final.
Oh, absolutely.
Final. Yeah. So
all you're doing is you're pre-populating all that corporate information. What's your company registration number? What's your tax number? What's your registered address? Da, 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 da.
Yeah. So that's relevant for new clients. If you think about the largest brokers, right? So the largest brokers, 90% of their business comes from renewing their existing policies. And they already have all that information for their existing customers. So the best source of customer information from the broker's perspective is their own records. Now, a new customer is different, right? But relatively speaking, the percentage of new submissions they're processing a month relative to renewal is low, right? So, and so, the demands on us are around, hey, help us streamline this 90% of our workflows and then go get the other 10%.
Mm-hmm. So. And in terms of, technologies and that you and I are familiar with, the latest development in artificial intelligence and obviously machine learning to some extent, is really sort of accelerating and changing. And I remember something you said earlier on, one of your first companies was it an agency for developing websites or something like that? I can't remember.
That's right.
We can do that today.
Open a chat. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, listen, I think about artificial intelligence and machine learning in the same way I think about blockchain, which is they are very powerful technologies, but they are by themselves not businesses, right? Okay. So they are tools to solve problems. And if the problem you are trying to solve can be solved faster, better, quicker, easier using machine learning or artificial intelligence, then you should consider it as one of your options. The important thing about machine learning and artificial intelligence that I think people maybe don't realize is that they require training, first of all, and training, knowing how to train a machine learning model is not a skill that I think many people have. So it's not an off the shelf tool that you can just grab and say, yeah, use artificial intelligence, that'll fix it. And so you have to have a trainer, and B, you have to have a lot of data. And so if you're considering AI or ML as a solution, you need to make sure that you're working with large data sets that you're trying to intelligently process, that you have a person or people who can train the system, and that you allocate enough time to train the system. And by the way, it's possible that you might train this, after 6 weeks of training the system, it's not giving you the results you want, and you've got to start over. So I think it's definitely not deterministic, and it is, you have to be confident that you're going to get an output that you couldn't do without it with a different tool. So,
absolutely. Now, you said something very useful and very, very, very topical, and that is a lot of people do make that leap that, it's on the blockchain, therefore it must be brilliant. Or, we're using artificial intelligence, it must be so good. No, it's got its, at the end of the day, it's a tool. Like you and I use a messaging application, various messaging applications. This technology has been around since, 80s.
Yep. Yeah, it's becoming more publicly, because of ChatGPT and OpenAI, right? All of a sudden, this idea that Google might get replaced with a more conversational search interface has made artificial intelligence accessible to the public in a way that for the last 10 years, the B2B aspects of AI and ML have not been, right? And so I think that's what's kind of pushing AI to the forefront of the public dialogue right now, which is exciting, right? Like it's a major evolutional change in the way we all interact with information. And I think it creates a lot of opportunity, and I'm excited to see what comes from it.
Absolutely. So in terms of where you are with Broker Buddha,
Yep.
Just forecasting a little bit about where do you see it, Broker Buddha, being in the next 5 years?
Yeah, listen, our mission is to eliminate the monotonous administrative work that frustrates the insurance professionals who protect the businesses that shape the world, right? Yeah. And there's a long way to go to achieve that mission. And a lot of it involves streamlining of the data capture and exchange, right? And so we've built the core interface, the workflow around submissions, but all the integrations I talked about, right? If I want to integrate with all the fleet management systems and all the HR management systems and all the payroll systems, right? That's years of work. If I want to integrate, deep two-way integrations with the major management systems, that's also years of work. If I want to integrate with the carrier systems to be able to deliver information, bring back and present quotes, and ultimately fulfill the full end-to-end, not just the data capture, but also the carrier submission, the quoting, the proposal, the binding. We've got a lot of opportunity ahead of us. Right now, brokers all use something called a management system. I mentioned that's what you would consider their system of record. Our goal is to be the leading system of engagement that the brokers use, both for their clients and their carriers. And once you do that, then you become deeply embedded in the infrastructure of the industry, and we'll be more like a Yahoo, where we don't want to make a lot of changes in the long run. We want to keep the current business and grow, 20% year over year, as opposed to doubling year over year.
Absolutely. Does the process that you put in place, is that transportable into other industries?
Not other industries, but definitely international. So the insurance workflow it's very insurance specific. The closest relative would be banking, but yeah. I can't think of anything in the banking industry. You don't renew a loan every year, right? You don't. Yes, the application process might be similar, but not the life cycle of a policy is very specific to insurance.
Yes.
But from our research, the workflows that we enable in the U.S. are very common, outside the U.S. as well: Canada, Europe, Latin America, Asia. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity for expansion beyond the U.S. market.
Absolutely. So you mentioned something about, very regular annual policies, annual insurance. Have you ever looked at what the model would look like when people want periodic insurance for specific things? Or specific periods of time, or specific events?
Yeah. I mean, from an insurance product perspective, I'm familiar with some products like that, like event insurance, right? Which is certainly something we support applications for festivals, for example, right? Yeah. So to us, the type of policy we're kind of agnostic to the type of policy. We're focused on helping the broker get the information to facilitate the quoting process for any type of policy. Now, were we to be able to integrate with these fleet management systems, we may be able to support policy like dynamic pricing on say commercial auto, for example, where throughout the year, if we're end-to-end integrated from the insured through the broker to the carrier, that policy can be updated dynamically when vehicles are added, or let's say somebody gets in an accident or something like that. And so we have the potential to enable that, but we're not in the business of creating or marketing those types of policies.
Stick to, as you said with Shazam, keep it simple.
Yeah, focus on one thing. So get one thing right. So
Absolutely. Now, that's in terms of the Broker Buddha. How would people who are watching this podcast get in touch with you, your team, or the platform? Can you enlighten us? Which is the best way?
Good choice. Good choice of words, by the way. Certainly, easy to get to our website, www.brokerbuddha.com. We're really active on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me, jason@brokerbuddha.com as well. And yeah, there's a variety of ways to find us, and if you're interested in partnering or looking at the platform, we can set up demo calls, walkthroughs. There's a lot of information on the website. We just did a bit of a brand upgrade and a new website to support that. So you'll see a lot of detail there. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity ahead, and we'd love to chat with anybody who's interested.
One question, just a final question.
Hit me.
The name Broker Buddha.
Yeah.
How did that come up? There's a good story there.
Yeah, there's I wish I could take credit for the name. The incubator developed the name, but I could tell you why it's so special, because it was very provocative at first, right? And I think any startup is you have a lot of challenges in terms of recognition and awareness, and so a name goes a long way. Broker Buddha works for three reasons. One, it speaks to who our audience is, right? So brokers, right? So it's in the name. It tells who we're for. It speaks to what the solution does. So the reference to Buddha is kind of a enlightenment, simplification, kind of signals sort of a peace and serenity thing. And a lot of what we're doing is simplifying workflows. So that really lands effectively there. And you want it to be memorable. And the name Buddha in a business setting is it's slightly jarring, not so jarring, but it's like, wait, you're talking about Buddha in business. And so it gets your attention. Yes. And plus there's the alliteration of the BB, Broker Buddha. And so the combination of all those things, the brand is actually really strong. It gives us a lot of opportunity to kind of work with the concept of enlightenment. Where the podcast is called The Enlightened Agent, for example. And it really speaks to what we're trying to solve for around simplicity of workflows and ease of doing business. So, and as a name, people, one of the hardest things in starting a business is getting people to recognize you, and the name goes a long way. So, really powerful.
Very powerful indeed. So, Jason, it's been a really, really enlightening time. Thank you very much indeed. I've learned a lot. This industry requires change and innovation, and I applaud the steps you're taking in that direction. Keeping it simple, which I think is a great way to go. And I love the name Broker Buddha, and I wish you all the best and luck. And I look forward to our further engagement and following the developments. So, Jason Keck, founder and CEO of Broker Buddha, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me, Hilton.
Thank you for viewing and engaging with today's podcast. If you're interested in knowing more about citiesabc.com with openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, go to our platforms, as well as you can find me on social media and DM me, Hilton Super, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And do go to the other interviews we have done on YouTube, and don't forget to like and comment. Thank you very much for your time and engaging with this interview on Citiesabc.